Değerli hocalarım, kıymetli öğrenci arkadaşlarım, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Tarih bölümünün geleneksel konferanslarından 42.sini bugün gerçekleştiriyoruz. Çok önemli bir konuğumuz var. Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde Üniversitesi'nde hoca olan McCarthy dendiğinde Ermeni meselesiyle ilgili akla gelir ilk defa. O yüzden hocamız geç Osmanlı döneminde birçok konuya el atmış. Rol alma işini daha fazla sürdürmeden Sayın McCarthy'yi konuşmalarını yapmak üzere kürsüye davet ediyorum. Buyurun efendim.
Colleagues, friends, students, I'm very glad to be here. Unfortunately for the students, I'm going to be giving a class, yet another class for you. This class is about population, and it's about the true and the false statistics that are used when people talk about Armenians. I'm going to talk about what's claimed as a genocide. I'm going to say that the genocide claims, the claims that Turks killed Armenians in a genocide, that these are based on false statistics. They're based on lies. And then I'm going to talk about the real statistics that show that there was no Armenian genocide. I'm going to begin by talking about fakes, by talking about lies, assuming I can make this work. And here is one example. I'm sorry that it's all in English, but I'm sure that the translators will tell you what it said. These are statistics. These are statistics from the 1890s. These are statistics that were made by missionaries, American missionaries, who came to the Ottoman Empire. And these statistics are supposedly statistics that are made by the Ottoman government. The Ottoman government never did these things. These are all completely lies. And they say that 20,000 Armenians were killed in large towns, 60,000 were killed in villages, 441,000 were starving, 521,000 were either killed or starving, 2,500 villages were destroyed. In fact, this is not at all what the Ottomans said. What the Ottomans said was that 20,000 Armenians total died. And you'll notice they're not counting any Muslims, even though thousands of Muslims died as well. There were very few villages that were destroyed, surely not 2,500 villages. To give an example, I've taken the province of Mamaret al-Aziz, which is today the Harput area, and taking that as another example, supposedly, of government statistics. Supposedly what the Ottoman government said were the numbers of dead Armenians. And these are very hard to read, unfortunately, but let's look at a little better example. The number who are supposedly dead, according to the Ottoman statistics, they said, the phony, the fake Ottoman statistics, 131,000. Actual numbers of Armenians in 110,000, really. They said that there were so many Armenians here, and that the Ottoman government had counted exactly the numbers of people who were killed, the numbers of people who were raped, the number of people who were forcibly converted to Islam. In other words, they say, you will become a Muslim or we will kill you. The numbers who died who were wounded, the numbers, etc. All these numbers supposedly were taken down and were recorded. They were recorded supposedly by asking people. Supposedly, there was a government census taken. Now, if you think about this, can you imagine workers going around to all of these villages and saying, excuse me, how many Armenians did you kill? How many women did you rape? How many places did you destroy? And getting any kind of answer? It would never happen. It didn't happen. It's all completely invented, totally invented. But people believe this. People in America, people in Europe believe this because they didn't know any better. They did not understand what was really going on. This is Sasun, which was an Armenian rebellion in 1894 and 1895. In Sassoon, the American missionaries wrote about all of the Armenians who supposedly were killed. One missionary wrote 6,000 to 10,000 Armenians died. Another one, 6,000. Another missionary wrote 5,000 to 10,000. Another three, tens of thousands supposedly. Right? Another one, 5,000. But the actual Armenian population was only 4,000 people. So if these guys were right, then some people would have had to die 2 times, perhaps 3 times. Impossible. The European Commission that studied this said 265 Armenians died. They were low. What really happened was about 900 Armenians died and about 900 Kurds, Muslims, died. Those are the real numbers, as you would expect, because they killed each other. But the American missionaries only wrote about dead Armenians, and they multiplied them by 10 times. When people in America or in Europe, when they read this, they said, see, the evil Turks killed these Armenians. They never looked at the truth. They never saw the true story. This area is the area that is claimed, that was claimed as Armenian. Records that supposedly, for the Armenians, supposedly were kept for this region. Now, people believe that they did not want to accept the Ottoman statistics. As we'll show you, the Ottoman statistics were good. But they didn't want to accept this. And so for this region, which they called the 6 vilayets, Sivas, Mamret, Aziz, Biblis, Van, Diyarbakir, this is what they called Armenian. In this area, they said that the Ottoman statistics must be wrong, and so in order to prove that Armenians were very high in number and that many Armenians had been killed, they simply made up lies. They simply made up lies. They called them the Armenian Patriarchate statistics. Now, it takes a little while to look at these, but if you look at these statistics, you will see that they show very many Armenians and not so many Turks. If you look at these statistics, which supposedly were made by the Armenian Patriarch, now you've got to remember this, supposedly by the Armenian Patriarch, you'll notice that they separate the Muslims. Turks, Circassians, Persians, Laz, Gypsies, Kurds, different Kizilbash, Saza, etc. They separate all the Muslims. Now, in order to understand this, you have to understand that no one knew how the Muslims were separated. No one knew who was a Kurd, who was a Turk, who was a Zaza, who was a Yazidi, who was a... No one knew this because the Ottomans kept all of their statistics by religion, not by ethnic group, not by language. So no one knew who was a Kurd or who was a Turk. No one knew this, but they said they did. They said they knew. What actually happened was they invented the statistics completely. They completely made them up. And they said, these come from the Armenian Patriarch. I actually asked not this, but the last Armenian Patriarch in Istanbul. I said, do you have any statistics like this? He said, no, we never kept these. So if the Patriarch claims the Patriarchs didn't do it, then who did? It actually was made by a sympathizer to the Dashnaks, one of the Armenian revolutionary parties. His name was Krikor Zohra, but he didn't want to admit it was his name, so he published a book under the French name Marcel Léal. He published it in Paris. So these Armenian statistics, patriarchate statistics supposedly, actually came from Paris, from a Dashnak sympathizer, an Armenian revolutionary. They were invented by him. And they were complete lies. But why did he divide the Muslims up so much? Well, because no matter how much he lied, no matter how much he did this, he still found just not as many Armenians. He added numbers all the time, but he found that there were still many more Muslims. So what did he do? He divided all the Muslims up so that he would say the Armenians are the biggest group. Which of course was nonsense, because the Muslims would stick together. If you were to take a vote, the Muslims would vote for the Sultan, not for any Armenian revolutionary party. If you look at the real statistics, which were taken by the Ottomans, and I'll explain that in a moment, if you look at the real statistics, you will see that the Ottoman statistics were quite different than the patriarch, so-called patriarchate statistics. The thing that's mainly different is, in the Ottoman statistics, there were many more Muslims and many fewer Armenians. And that's true of all the provinces as you go through. I only listed some here. But the real statistics always showed many times more Muslims than Armenians. But what they've done here is they've taken people from this group and they've put them in this group. They've taken numbers and they've put them in. And they're completely fake. They not only faked the statistics from the Ottoman Empire, they even made false statistics for the Russian Empire. In the Russian Empire, they took a census in 1897. And unfortunately, this zero belongs up here. But the Russian statistics showed 891,000 Armenians. The Armenian statistics say 1.3 million Armenians. The Russian statistics say these many Muslims. The fake Armenian statistics say only this much. So they not only lied about the Ottoman statistics, they even lied about the Russian Christian statistics. Because no matter who took the census, no matter who counted the population, whether it was the Ottomans or the Russians, there always were very few Armenians. There always were many more Muslims, not just in Anatolia, but also in the southern Caucasus region. The other thing they did was they said that in 1882, before the troubles of 1895, before the Armenian rebellions and the Muslim revenge, before that time, look what they say happened. They say, again, this should be zero, should be up here. They say that there were 1,910,000 Armenians in Anatolia. And that by 1912, there were only 1 million Armenians in Anatolia. So what they're saying is that the Turks killed 900,000 Armenians. That the Turks killed all these people, and that's why they're gone. Well, what's happened is easy to see. What they've done is they've so increased these numbers, they so made up incredibly big numbers, and then they said, unfortunately, all those people were killed, so they're not here anymore. One lie leads to another lie, leads to another lie. The lies keep coming. Fake statistics, though, are believed by people. We look at these things today and we say, this is nonsense. No one could believe this. But actually, at the time, people knew nothing about the Ottoman Empire. They knew nothing about Turks and Armenians. And so the Europeans and the Americans, they did believe these things. They did believe them. They couldn't read the Ottoman statistics. They didn't know what a Salname was. They had no idea, and so they believed. And this even extended to governments. It even extended to governments. However, there was one group of Armenians who really wanted to know the truth. These statistics were all printed for publication. They were all printed for Americans. They were all printed so that foreigners would have an idea that was false. But some Armenians really wanted to know how many people there were, how many Armenians. And so the Armenian Patriarch at Echmiadzin, the head of the Armenian Church, who was in Armenia, in the Russian Empire, he sent out people to try to say how many Armenians there were in the Ottoman Empire. He used Ottoman statistics, he used local people, he asked, and when you take their numbers, what the Patriarch in Echmiadzin said, the real Patriarch statistics, and the numbers that I have come up with, the difference is only 5%. Or in other words, the real Patriarch statistics, and you could call them McCarthy statistics, they work out to be almost exactly the same. So the Armenians knew that these were lies, and they still put them forth. Now, what governments believe. After the First World War, after all the propaganda, after all the people in America and in Europe were told that the Turks had done terrible things, they had what were called peace conferences. And at these peace conferences, they tried to decide how they would divide Turkey up, how they would divide up Anatolia, what they would give to the Armenians, what they would give to the Kurds, what they would give a little bit, they would leave to the Turks, etc. They decided that they would have professors, intelligent people who would tell them what to do. And so the man they relied on to talk about Armenians was a gentleman named Leon Dominian, who was an Armenian, who had studied at Bosford at Robert College, today it's Wasatch University. He had studied there, and he had gone to the United States, and he had created statistics for the American government, so that the American president and others would know. And if you look at these statistics, this purple or blue color is supposed to be Armenians. This are supposed to be little groups of Kurds that are everywhere. The Turks are up here. So in other words, this was a great Armenian land with a few Kurds. Now, we all know that's nonsense. We all know that that's not the case, but if you take a closer look at all this, when you look at the numbers of Armenians, you'll notice that there are places in which there were hardly any Armenians at all, as we'll show you. All these things were completely invented in his brain. He sat down and he took a map and he said, this is what Armenians should be like. He said, this is what I want Armenia to look like. He had to admit that there were some. But you'll notice, remember, these are supposedly the Turks. There are no Turks in Erzurum. There are no Turks in Kars. There are very few Turks in Sivas even. Now, who can believe that? Who can believe such a thing? Who has ever gone to Erzurum and not noticed that the people there are Turks? And the answer is, only people that have never been to Erzurum. And Americans and Europeans had never been to Erzurum. And they said, oh, this man knows because he was from Turkey. And they believed him. They believed what he said. Interesting thing, he was an Armenian. He didn't like Greeks. And so when he published the figures on Greeks, he said, you cut them way down. He said there were very few Greeks who lived in the Ottoman Empire. He said most of the Christians in the Ottoman Empire were Armenians. This is what the American government believed. Now, he almost surely knew he was wrong. He almost surely knew he was a liar. But he still did it anyway, because he wanted Americans to actually give all this land to Armenia. And the Americans tried to do that. President Woodrow Wilson believed him and tried to make an Armenia that included all of this land and said this should be Armenia. Now he failed. He failed because of Mustafa Kemal. He failed because of Kazım Karabekir. He failed because the Turks fought back. But if he had had his way, this would still be Armenia today, despite the fact that the people who lived there were not Armenians. In the United States Congress, they wanted to know the facts of what happened in Armenia, and so they asked Armenians. They never asked Turks, only Armenians. And the head of the Armenian organization that testified before the U.S. Congress was a man named Vahan Kardashian. And as you can see, this is what he said. He said that there were 1,400,000 Armenians in what was called Turkish Armenia, the 6 vilayets, as he called them. In Cilicia, there were so many. Well, when you put these numbers together, if you add these numbers together, notice 1.4 million, that's 2.8 million people, right? But there were 3.7. Who are the others? Who are the other people? And the answer is, he just didn't want to say, because the other people also were Turks and Kurds. And so he just didn't say it all. In Cilicia, once again, there are 169,000 people that he doesn't even mention. Now, when a demographer, like myself, looks at these statistics, he just shakes your head. He said, who could believe such nonsense? And the answer is, everybody did. People believed it all through Europe, all through America. They believed it and thought it was true. So statistics were used, false statistics were used to advance a false idea of the Ottoman Empire, a false idea of history. They were used and are used today still to say that there was a genocide of the Armenians. But statistics don't always have to be false. There are real population statistics that we should be using, and those are the statistics that were made by the Ottoman Empire. This is a basic principle of demography, the most important principle of demography, which is if you want to know how many people there are, you have to count the people. If I asked you how many people were in this room, and you didn't know, you might guess. You might say, oh, there are 100, there are 200. But if you really want to know, you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have to count the people. If you think about your neighborhood, your village, your city, your town, wherever you come from, if I ask you how many people live in your area, if you don't know the statistics from the government, you will guess crazy. You will say 800, someone else will say 400, someone else will say 700, someone will say 75. People will guess all kinds of different numbers. In fact, the basic principle is if you want to know how many people there are, especially in a big area, you have to count them. It's the only way you can know. Well, who counted the people in the Ottoman Empire? The Ottoman government, no one else. And if you think about it, people say, oh, the Armenian patriarch counted, or the Greek patriarch counted, or Greeks counted. Can you imagine? Just think of it. You know Armenian priests dressed in their costumes. Now imagine a whole bunch of them going around to all the villages in the Ottoman Empire and saying, excuse me, how many people are here? How many people are here? Counting the number of people in villages. Ridiculous. If anything like that happened, we would know it, of course, but you imagine. Think about this. Think of an Armenian priest going to a Kurdish tribe in eastern Anatolia and asking the Kurdish tribe, now tell me, how many women are here? What do you think would happen to him? These are all impossible things. So if you want to know, you have to count the population. There are some problems. There are some problems when you count the population. Right? And one of these problems is when you look at the Ottoman statistics, you look at the statistics, you'll find that sometimes they don't make any sense. Specifically because of what the Ottomans did. This is the population of an area that they had very little idea of, the populations in areas of Iraq. The three provinces of Iraq, Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra. If you look at these numbers, you'll notice something's a little strange. For instance, in Basra Vilayeti, there are only 14 women. Only 14 women in Basra. Now, I think there probably were more. In fact, it's important to understand what it says. The Ottomans did not say this was the population. They said these are the people registered in the Tahrir. Or in other words, they are the people that are written down. They recognized that in places like Basra, they didn't really know. How would you find out how many women there were in Basra? You would go to the house of a Shia and you'd say, please bring out your women, I want to count them. You couldn't do that. And so the Ottomans were very honest. The Ottomans always tried to be honest. Sometimes they were so honest you wanted to be mad at them. You say, don't tell people that. But in fact, the Ottomans said exactly what they meant. So when we look at Ottoman statistics, we realize these are people who are trying to tell the truth. No matter what, they're trying to tell the truth. And if the truth looks funny, they still put it down. They still do the best that they can. They're not trying to lie. There are some other things, however, when demographers look at these things, we have to realize that there were some problems with Ottoman statistics. As I say, one of the problems was women were never counted properly because it was hard in villages, hard to count the women. And so we usually have to just take the number of men and double it. This isn't perfect, but it's much better than any of the phony statistics. There also is another problem. This is the worst. This is the worst that it gets. Usually it's much better than this. But you'll notice this is what we call an age pyramid. The youngest people down here going up to the highest areas. And there are two difficulties here. One of them is that children are very poorly recorded. That's because when the Ottomans took they made records, and when the man came through every 5 years, every 10 years, then he'd report. The children weren't reported a lot of times. Sometimes people, especially Muslims, did not want to tell about their children because they know the children would be taken to the army. And so they didn't do it. So we know that there is what they call an under-registration of children. We also know that people say they're much older than they really are. This is something that still continues today in the Turkish census. Because people, especially people in villages, they get honor, they get respect because they're old. So consequently, if you're like me, you're 71 years old, you would say, I'm really 80 years old. Or I'm really 100 years old, or whatever. You would add a few years because that makes you look better. It gives you more respect, and that's what happened. But luckily, demographers can use these data. We can use demographic statistics to alter them, to add the numbers of children that should be there, to bring the ages down a bit. If you use modern scientific methods, you can find out actually how many people were in these areas, which is, of course, exactly what we do. These are the real Ottoman statistics adjusted for those problems. The real Ottoman statistics for the provinces that were called the 6 vilayets, or Turkish Armenia, as it was called. These areas, you can see very obviously what the truth was. The truth was that Muslims, Turks and Kurds, Muslims outnumbered Armenians 3, 4, 5 to 1 in every province. There were many, many more Muslims than ever there were Armenians in these areas. And even if you assume that people like me were wrong and we said there were too many Muslims, that many more? The fact of the matter is, even if I was wrong by 50%, Muslims would still vastly outnumber. And I'm not wrong by 50%. These statistics are pretty good, pretty accurate statistics. If you want to see graphically what it looks like, this is the map of what's called Armenia, the 6 vilayets. The green are the Muslims, the red are the Armenians, and the others are different groups of people. The other area, Cilicia, down here, also the numbers of Muslims, the numbers of Armenians, and the numbers of others. No matter how you look at this, there was no Armenia. And there had not been an Armenia for centuries in this area. Another way to look at it is if you look at the density of Armenians. If you look at the density of Armenians, how many there were. Notice here, in these places, 12% of the people are Armenians. This, North Halab, there are a number. The biggest groups of Armenians actually are in Bitlis. But even then, the people in Bitlis are a relatively small percentage of the population. Taking as an example Erzurum province, the big Erzurum province in the Ottoman Empire. If you look at Erzurum and you want to find out about the Armenians, you will notice something. And that is, as I showed briefly before, there was no place where all the Armenians gathered together. Even though the Armenians were only ever, 15% of the population. This 15% was spread out all over Anatolia. So as you can see in the last map, they were as dense in Izmit as they were in Van. In fact, Izmit had a very big Armenian population. They were spread out all over Anatolia, and even in the provinces where there were many Armenians, in this case the province of Erzurum, if you look at these areas, the percentage of Armenians, you would expect that the Armenians would be primarily in this area, on the borders of Armenia. That's where you would think. But actually, look where they are. Look where they are. They're spread out all over. The biggest groups of Armenians are not by what's called Armenia in the Soviet, in the Russian Empire. The biggest groups